Hello everybody, welcome to the General CV Workshop with Polish Professionals event. My name is Chinzi and I will be your host today. So before we start our event, here is a brief introduction about Globalizing Malaysian Talent, GMT. So basically, GMT is a non-profit student organization founded by a group of Malaysian students in the UK. Our primary mission is to connect with a network of visionary stakeholders in view to engage and nurture Malaysian student talents, mainly in the Northern England region. So our events cater to a range of professions, which includes engineering, law, finance, entrepreneurship, and etc. So we are constantly working hard to provide more developmental and career opportunities to Malaysian students. Note that we are currently recruiting executives and also directors for our organization on a rolling basis. So if you are looking into developing your leadership skills and to expand your network, please contact us by email or just keep an eye out on our recruitment posts. Just before we start, if you have any questions throughout the session, please write it down as we will be doing a 10-minute Q&A session at the end of each session. So you will be able to ask your questions directly to our speakers. To ask questions during the Q&A, either click on the Vote Yes button, which is to the right of your video feed, and a moderator will unmute you accordingly. Or you can leave a comment in the Zoom chat lobby. So if you have any problem finding the button, please send a message on the main chat and we will help you to sort it out. So today, our first speaker is a career coach and also the founder of GetAPhing. She coaches ambitious professionals to achieve career growth online and offline by creating a professional online presence and sharpening corporate confidence to create a sustained success. Let us welcome Ms. Mei Phing. Nice to meet you, Ms. Mei Phing.
Hi, thanks for the welcome. And I really appreciate the invite. So thank you everyone for spending your Saturday morning with me. I really appreciate that. So what we are going to do today is pretty much a very quick and compact 30 minutes general CV workshop to help you connect to better internship opportunities or job opportunities. So give me a quick 10 seconds. I'll share the slides. Okay, so for those of you, if you can see the slides, can you just put in a number 1 in the chat box so that I can see who can see what? Okay, great. All right, awesome. All right, so again, thank you so much for the invite. I am actually a Malaysian that has worked in Singapore for a very long time. So I'm really happy to be part of this event. So just a little bit about me, if we are not yet connected. Hi, my name is Mei Phing. I am a Chartered Certified Accountant of the UK, Singapore, as well as a governance, risk and compliance professional with more than 10 years of experience. So in my past corporate journey, I guess the past life before becoming a career coach, I was in Standard Chartered Visa as well as Ernst & Young, basically working on audit assurance, risk compliance, portfolio management, business management. So all the areas that you earlier shared about really supporting talent in the finance space, entrepreneurship, engineers, lawyers, all of which I have worked with. So if you have any questions at any point, or if you feel that any examples that I can share with you that will make it a lot more holistic for your learning today, you can feel free to put it in the chat box. So nowadays, I spend time as a career coach working with young professionals on building and growing their career online as well as offline. I am also a career coach with University of Hong Kong, which is one of the top universities in Asia for their master's program, as well as an industry mentor with NTU Singapore. So just a very quick background about myself. So I just wanted to also share with you a little bit more about my professional experience. So when I work with younger professionals, the very common question I get asked is it really possible to grow your career, and what is really the direction? Do I need to start with a big company, small company? What's the difference and whatnot? So at the end of the day, it's about attitude. It's about having the view for what you actually want for yourself. So I actually graduated in 2009 during the financial crisis of 08, 09. So I started in a very small company in Malaysia, despite having a UK qualification, right? ACCA chartered accountant, but didn't mean that I could start in the Big Four. But gradually I moved on to join Ernst & Young Singapore as part of the financial services office. Then during that time, volunteered for a lot of interesting projects that gave me more experience aside from just audit. Also got into the regulatory compliance space as well. Then later on, I moved on to Visa, where I took on the internal auditor role, traveling to more than 10 countries in Visa's coverage. So a little bit more on the people aspect, understanding the cross-cultural aspects, how to work with different people, how to really manage your workload when you're traveling all the time by plane mostly. And later on, I moved on to Standard Chartered. And when I left Standard Chartered, I was a senior director and head of governance for the global financial institutions and fintech portfolio. So on a day-to-day basis, I was pretty much responsible for a $1.5 billion portfolio, managing teams and projects across 43 markets. So in terms of like working with different kind of stakeholders, I am highly experienced in that. So hopefully in today's session, any questions or anything that you are curious about what really happens in the corporate world, I can probably give you a little bit more perspective around what is theory and what is practical. So if any questions again, right, just feel free to put it in the chat box. Okay, so yeah, like I said, nowadays I'm pretty much a career coach. I do one-on-one coaching, group trainings, and speaking events just like this one. But more importantly, today's session is really about you guys. So the question that is on everybody's mind is, how can I stand out as the best candidate for a job, right? So whether it's a job or an internship, similarly, we all want to be able to present ourselves in the best way possible and obviously be identified as the person who can bring value and also be seen as of value that an organization or a company really wants to hire us and say, okay, I think you are the one. So there are three components that we'll tackle today in the short 30 minutes. The first one, key elements of a CV resume that you should focus on, as well as the common mistakes to avoid. So it's easy for me to just say, okay, these are all the things that you need to do. But more importantly, you should know what you shouldn't do. It's better to learn how to identify errors so that you can eliminate errors rather than always going for, oh, I need to do this, which is good. But if you don't know what you need to eliminate, then it kind of crisscrosses later on. So second component, common interview questions that you should prepare for and how to tackle them. So I'll be sharing a couple of interview questions. Some of them are more topical, the stuff that you find online, but some of which are some of the questions that I used to ask when I recruit from fresh graduates all the way up to director level as well. So I'll be sharing a little bit of stories there. And lastly, networking strategies to connect with future potential employers via an online professional platform such as LinkedIn. So, okay, so let's move on. So the first part, which is CV resume writing. So this is now, I think, a question for everyone. So in the chat box, can you guys just type in very quickly, how much time do you think a HR or a hiring manager takes to read your CV, the one that you have submitted? Just a quick one in the chat box, guys. Okay, I see 7 seconds. I see 1 minute. Anybody else? Any thoughts? I mean, there's no like exactly right or wrong, but just wanted to get a sense of what you guys are aware of. Okay, so I see 7 seconds, 1 minute, 15 seconds. So everybody else in agreement? Everybody else also thinks that it's around 7 seconds to 60 seconds? Okay, so I'd say that between 10 to 20 seconds, depending on how interesting you are, right? But I would say average about 10 seconds. So when I was recruiting for Standard Chartered, every position that was posted, whether it's a junior associate position, right, meaning 1 to 3 years of experience, even all the way up to director, we would get about 400 applications, about 400 to 500 applications for every single role that I recruit. So if there are so many, then how is it possible that either HR or the hiring manager will really have that much time. So going back to that very simple example, so every role that I would hire for in my team, which is a business team, we get about 500 applications. So now I want you guys to guess, how many CVs do you think HR sends to me as a hiring manager to select for interview? So of the 500, how many do I, as a hiring manager, receive from HR? Okay, so someone saying 50, anything else? 25, okay. I see 10, 25, 50. How about others? 100, okay, 10. Yeah, so 10 is actually the closest answer. Maybe I've also received 5 before, right? So I would say about probably 10 to 20, 10 to 20. So if it's only 10 to 20, so how can you stand out is the first thing. And normally what happens is that from the 10 to 20, I would then maybe pick about 5 to then decide for an interview. So if reviewing that 10, 15, I don't get any that I want, I'll probably go to HR again and say, hey, can you send me another batch, right? Then they'll maybe send me another 10 or 15 as well. So if you're really thinking about the number of CVs that actually received by the hiring manager, so this is not HR, this is actually the department or the manager who will be hiring you and working with you, you're talking about maybe 30, 50 to the absolute maximum, assuming that I cannot find the person that I'm looking for. So probably about, I would say 30 is probably the average one. So also understanding the perspective of a hiring manager. So a manager is not just responsible for recruitment, right? So in the past, I attend meetings, I run teams, I look at projects, I review this and that, So because of that, if every single CV requires like 1 minute, then it's already half an hour of my time, 1 hour of my time, 2 hours of my time. So everything is done very quickly. So a lot of it is really down to like first impressions. So in the past, when I was running portfolios at Standard Chartered, in an 8-hour workday, I spent 4 hours in meetings, 4 full hours. So when I walk out of the meeting, if I receive a batch of resumes, I want them to be precise, quick, so that I can pick the quickest one that makes the most sense to me. So if you're thinking that people will spend a lot of time trying to figure your CV out, it doesn't really happen nowadays. So everything's very dynamic, everything's very quick, very fast-paced. So similarly, this will definitely impact how you draft your CV, right? So we'll talk about some of just the common mistakes to avoid. And this is not something that only fresh graduates make. Even hiring up to like 10, 20 years of experience, I do still see some of these errors. But good thing is that a lot of these you can easily avoid. So the first one, fonts that are difficult to read. So all the fancy fonts that you have in mind, that's not for a formal document, right? So fonts that are difficult to read, if you're not sure if the font is difficult to read or not, maybe pass it to your friend, pass it to some peers and just say, hey, look at this, look at my CV. Does it look easy to read, right? So that's probably one thing that you can do if you really can't identify yourself. Secondly is childish email address. So in the past, I have hired for, I actually published a position to hire somebody as a manager. And the email address that came in was some sort of like, pink fairy, I don't know, something really funny. And I looked at it, I'm like, how can I take you seriously if you are not presenting yourself as a professional, right? So email address may look like something really small, but you want to just make sure that it is easily identifiable, meaning that the best is to put your name because it's a lot easier to remember. It also makes the work of HR easier when they want to reach out to you as well. Next thing, no clear contact details. So I have also received CVs where everything looks great, but I cannot find their contact details. So at the end of the day, you need to remember that a CV is pretty much a passport for you to get to an interview. But in order for you to get to the interview, people must be able to contact you. So make sure that contact details are right up top, right below your name, right? Your name and then email address, phone number. So it's really, really clear that if you're the best candidate from the batch, then you're easily contactable as well. So think about it, 10 seconds, right? I was just reading your CV. and then I can't find the email address. Probably I'll just move on to someone else. So you don't want to be in that situation. Okay, next thing is unprofessional photo. So there's a bit of a debate whether you should put a photo or not. So I'd say that it really depends on you. I would say as a fresh graduate, there's definitely no harm putting in a photo, because a lot of times when we hire for fresh graduates, I'm looking for like positive attitude. So a person that is enthusiastic and dedicated, and put in a professional photo, smiley photo probably helps a lot. But later on in your career, I think it becomes a little bit more blurry whether it would help or not. Okay, so the other common errors to avoid, this is actually a very big one. So I'll share with you some examples later. No executive summary section. So recently I've been working with a lot of master's students from Hong Kong University, and I realized that they don't have an executive summary. So let me maybe ask you guys now, how many of you have an executive summary in your CV? So maybe put a yes or a no. If you don't know what it is, then just say like not sure in the chat box so I can get a sense. Okay, no and not sure. Okay, I see one yes. Okay, great, thanks guys. So I'll show you some examples later. So back to what I was mentioning earlier, right? So let's say a hiring manager only has 10 seconds to review your CV. So if you don't have an executive summary, which pretty much consolidates your background, education, your soft skills, and some of the maybe internships, some of the stuff that you have learned, you're actually getting HR to try to figure out what role works for you or what your strengths are, which is then becomes a little bit more disadvantageous because people don't have time. So don't worry about this. I'll show you a little bit of examples later. So the other stuff would be like education not clearly stated, achievements not highlighted. So one of the common issues I also see is that people tend to just put in bullets of what they have done, but they don't talk about what they have learned during those internships. What did they actually achieve? So there is a difference between just dumping bullets of every single thing that you did versus, okay, as a result of what I've done, this is how I've managed to help. This was who I managed to help. So the impact and the achievement is so much more important than just listing down every single thing that you have done. Okay, so lastly would be what I consider irrelevant information. So recently somebody asked me, oh, I have a yoga certification. Should I put into my CV? And then I asked her, okay, so what kind of role are you applying for? She was like, oh, I want to be a finance executive. I'm like, okay, but if it's not very relevant, then you can either put it into like, hobbies or extra co-curricular activity, but probably not something that you put up top in your CV or even in a cover letter. So at the end of completing your CV, one thing you need to ask yourself, look at the whole thing holistically and ask yourself, does the whole thing align? Does the whole thing make sense for the role that you're applying for, right? Does it make sense? Because everything could be correct in what you've written, but is it right for the role that you are hiring for? Because at the end of the day, it's about, would you hire yourself? So if your CV is like all over the place, then if you look at it, you feel like, actually this is a little bit messy, then guess what somebody else who does not know you would think? Probably they may not bother, which is worse. Or they may think, okay, this person is maybe a little bit disorganized, this person is not clear, which would then not make you the best candidate as well. Okay, so now I'm going to share with you some basic ones on key areas you need to focus on, some of which I've already touched upon. So use classic fonts, Arial, Times, Tahoma, Calibri. These are the more common ones. So one student told me last week, oh, maybe these fonts are so boring. I said, but you're getting a corporate job. So if you think you want to use fancy fonts, you probably have to go and become a designer. And these are basically the expectation for HR and a lot of hiring managers as well. So in the past, I've also received CVs where I cannot even read what is written. So a CV is supposed to sell yourself. So even if you think it looks really pretty, but if somebody else cannot read it, they're just going to pass it on. So that's probably not what you want for yourself also. So again, if you're not sure whether the font works or not work, you can always share your CV with someone else and just say, hey, have a look at this. Like, is it easy to read for you? Then you can get a little bit of feedback if you're not sure. Okay, so some of the other stuff I've already covered earlier. So professional email address, phone number, because contact, I would say phone number or email, like those up top, like next to your name would be good. If you want to put in a photo, put in a clear headshot. So meaning not photos like all the way down and people try to figure out how you look like. So if you want to put in a photo, just put in like a proper headshot, like the one that I have in one of my earlier slides. So key summary, I'll show you guys a little bit later. But more importantly, right, remember to always indicate your skill set. So what kind of soft skills did you manage to learn? So even though you maybe have taken an internship or a part-time job, what kind of soft skills did you manage to pick up? Is it communication? Is it collaboration skills, right? Being a team player, time management, project management. So one thing that people tend to forget is that before your CV gets to the hiring manager, HR picks it up first. And HR expects soft skills. That is the reality. So in the past, I've hired for very, very technical roles as well. But some of these CVs, because they're just so technical, they don't indicate soft skills. Like it actually doesn't get passed to me at some point in time because it couldn't pass HR in the first place. So some of those I figured it out after I bypassed HR and I looked at the CVs myself. But I would say that most hiring managers will not do that. So what you can do is to help indicate that very clearly. So aside from technical stuff that you have done or you have delivered reports, all those are good. But what were some of your soft skills that you have managed to pick up? And for example, you did maybe tutoring. Okay, so you taught maths and algebra, whatever, right? But what soft skills could you have picked up from that? Maybe it could be like, okay, improve communication, interpersonal skills by having to manage like 10 children or something like that. So these are some ways that you can kind of indicate that you are gradually improving some of the skills that may be helpful in the actual workplace as well. Because realistically, if you're doing only an internship or a part-time job, there is no way that you will be 100% responsible for a big piece of work. But you can definitely still thrive by doing well in that small piece of work that's allocated to you. So that's how you can kind of bring out a little bit more about what you've done, but also the impact of what you've done, like how you have helped in certain ways, and maybe some of the skills that you managed to pick up as well. And lastly, what I call targeted job keywords. So for example, if you're applying for a certain accounting role or legal role and so forth, look at the JD and are there any specific keywords? I would say, I call it the job keywords that always appears in postings for this kind of role. So make sure that your CV also covers that because that is the language that your employers are using. So make sure that you are also aligned to use the similar language as well. Okay, so any questions so far? Can always put in CV. I know we have a bit of a short time, but these are very frequently asked questions. So I'll try to cover a little bit more for you guys. Okay, so now to the very famous summary section. So I'm sharing with you two sample summary sections from students as well who has worked with me directly. So a CV that is just like all education information, blah, 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 where HR needs to figure it out themselves versus maybe a CV like this one. So let's say this one. The first thing I open, the CV, after the name, I look at this. Probably this one takes me about 5 seconds to read. Then it gives me an immediate idea. Number one, education. What is this fresh graduate's education? Is it relevant to the role that I'm hiring? Then I get to look at very quickly what are the soft skills, what are her hard skills. And then she also talks about, she has taken up internship experiences in whatever sector. So this could be maybe sectors that you might be interested in when you apply for. So it helps me as a hiring manager or even HR to determine if you're a good fit right at the get-go without me trying to figure out from the 2 pages of your CV to see if you make sense or not, right? So she was also very specific to say, okay, equip me with these skills, studying in different countries, I gain international exposure, I'm open to roles, So I'll give you guys another example. So this is actually from one of my clients in Canada. So data science professional, So when I first look at this, I'm like, okay, highly qualified, right? Highly educated, good. Looking for this role. So if I look at it as a HR hiring manager, then I will ask myself, okay, like, do I have a data analyst role available? Right? Sometimes it's not because the CV is poor, it's because the company doesn't have the role that you want, or they cannot tell from your resume, or they can't tell from your CV what role can you best fit in. So this is a good way of like letting the company know what you're looking for and what your strengths are that you can actually do well, right? So it gives a bit more detail, like what previous training programs that he did, some of the work that he did, as well as what he identified as his strongest soft skill, which is communicator with strong presentation skills. So these are just really, really simple snippets to show you guys. It doesn't have to be very long actually. So about 4 sentences, it will take about maybe 5-6 seconds for a HR hiring manager to read. But from this point on, normally I would then decide if, okay, this person is interesting enough, right? I may want to read more and try to figure out where I can best place this graduate, or I may say, maybe not for me. Okay, given these 2 examples alone, now I want to have a little bit of a little activity for you guys. So just looking at these 2 summaries, how many of you guys will say, okay, I mean, these people look interesting, I want to learn more? Maybe just type in a 1. Or if you think that there's completely no impact, doesn't matter, I don't really learn much more about the graduate or the person, maybe just put a 0. So I can see whether, you guys are able to identify the impact of just these few sentences or not. In chat box, please. Okay, so mainly it's a 1. So I see a few questions. Will this be slightly lengthy in both summaries? Actually, the summary really is up to you. But I just wanted to let you know that not everybody is going to read every single word that you write in your CV. So if you want to try, after today's session, go back to your CV and use a timer. Time 10 seconds. Ask yourself, and then like put an alarm, right? See how much you have only managed to read. So it's not about this, the summary is not about getting you hired immediately. It's just to generate interest, enough interest for someone to actually finish reading your CV. Like I've read so many CVs over the years. I don't think there was one that I read every single word, to be honest. Okay, thanks everyone for your participation. Let's move on to the next bit. Okay, so this was also a requested part of today's sharing, which is common interview skills, like how to tackle the most common questions. So I think we do have some mock sessions probably next week. So some of the common ones I'm sure you guys know already. Tell me about yourself. So I just want to let you guys know, right? The reason why I get my students to write an executive summary is so that they don't blank out when they get asked this question, tell me about yourself. Because the summary essentially is about you sharing about yourself, but in a more concise form, right? So you can always prepare to talk about yourself, your education, internships, part-time work you've done, soft skills that you have. But make sure that it's actually aligned to your CV. So the biggest tip I can give you to nail an interview is to make sure that you are very clear whatever that you have written in your CV. I have interviewed people before, they cannot even explain to me what they have written in their CV. So actually that destroys a lot of trust and also destroys a lot of your reputation, especially when you are really eager for the role, and then I may ask you certain things that you have written, but you couldn't answer. So make sure that before you even step into an interview, you know what you have written in your CV inside and out, because you just don't know what questions will be asked. Obviously, these are the more common ones. Yeah. Okay, so the other common question is, what have you learned from your internship and part-time job? So what have you learned mostly is best articulated maybe in a story. So use this opportunity to talk about some of the soft skills that you have managed to pick up, especially as a fresh graduate. That is important. Like I said, soft skills you can continue to develop, but to say that you have massively changed the department in your 2 months internship probably is a little bit difficult. So prepare with maybe 2 stories so that you don't panic during the interview, right? So 2 stories, because normally the follow-up question to that question is, give me an example, tell me about a time, right? So if you don't have the stories, ready, you may find yourself panicking, or then, you know, you don't want to sit in front of the interview and then start thinking, oh yeah, actually, what did I learn? What did I actually do in the internship? I cannot remember, right? So preparation definitely is key, but take time, write down 2 stories each, maybe for each part-time job or each internship that you have done. Just write down 2 simple examples so that you don't panic. Okay, so some of the other questions that are also quite common that personally I like to ask is, what is your career goal? So like, you know, if we were to hire you, what do you want to get out of this role, right? So have a think about what do you foresee your career to be, maybe in 3 years' time, right? And then just kind of jot it down. Make sure that it makes sense to you before you go for the interview. Because this is a question I think stumbles a lot of our fresh graduates. So next question, very common one. What are your strengths or maybe your biggest weakness? So this one is a question about self-awareness. If you don't have self-awareness, it's going to be very difficult to answer this question. So I highly recommend you guys to maybe take a very simple personality test in case you're not sure what your biggest strengths are or your weakness. Or the other way is that if you're going to tell a story for this one, make sure that you tie it back into something that you have learned so that, you know, your whole CV kind of like tells a full story as well. So lastly, any questions for me? So as an interviewer, I always like to ask, so do you have any questions for me? So do prepare some questions. There's no way that you don't have any questions for the interviewer at all. So maybe prepare 2 will be helpful. Some common questions that you can ask is, oh, you know, if I were to be, so can you share a bit more about how this department is structured? You know, how, if I were to be hired, what would be my key priorities in the first 90 days? So these are, you know, pretty common questions to show the interviewer that you have an interest in the role. You're not just massively applying and rehearsing all the answers, but you actually didn't have a real think about the role. So it does show a little bit more about your interest as a professional. And more importantly, this entire interview process is you demonstrating, you also being clear to yourself, right? If you were just to do a self-reflection, would you actually want to work with you? If you feel that the answer is no, then that's something that you still need to sharpen on, whether it's your interview skills or maybe getting a bit more career clarity on whether is this the kind of role that you really want and really suitable for you, and you see that is something that you can potentially do for 2-3 years. Okay. Next one, no, we don't really have a lot of time. So this is the other section that was also requested by the team. Online professional presence, why should you care? So we are currently living in a digitized world. So, and obviously the group here is obviously, you know, also globalizing Malaysian talent. So LinkedIn actually is a really, really good platform that personally has brought a lot of opportunities for me. So I managed to join the visa regional team because I applied on LinkedIn. I consistently was headhunted into Standard Chartered and also different companies just because I have a very strong profile on LinkedIn. So if you don't have LinkedIn, I highly encourage you to create one. And these are some of the things that you can do. Number one, recognizing that LinkedIn is pretty much a 24/7 online resume. So earlier in my example, if I as a hiring manager only received 20 CVs out of the 500 applications, who else is actually going to see your CV? But if you put it on LinkedIn, pretty much everybody can see it 24/7, especially if it's well done. So it helps you stand out a little bit more. So use that as a platform to share your skills and experiences, be in your profile. If you feel a little bit more adventurous, you can always create a post on your own, talking about some of the soft skills that you have learned, different situations that you have managed to pick up certain skills and so forth. Then next thing, you can always learn from industry leaders. So this is also a demonstration that you are quite proactive in wanting to thrive in the industry and also continuously working on your personal development, right? So learning from industry leaders could be connecting with maybe more senior people in your field. Maybe you can engage in their posts or you can read it from time to time. So that's more part of your professional development. So from a networking perspective, so LinkedIn is a very good online networking platform. So as a student, aside from connecting with just your peers, I would highly encourage you to connect with HR and recruiters in the on the platform. So it's quite easy to identify them because normally they'll say HR, talent acquisition, learning and development. So connect with them. And because I've recently been seeing a trend where HR would directly post a job or an internship on their page alone. So they don't even use the job function anymore. They're like, hey, you know, we're hiring for these 3 positions and this is something that we want to, if you want to apply, this is the email. So by connecting with them, you're actually giving yourself like the best chance possible to have a look at that post and be one of the first few people who apply. And overall, I think it does increase career opportunities. Personally, for me, when I was in the corporate world, every month I will receive about 2 to 3 job opportunities. They will send me a message and say, hey, we have this role, that role. Are you interested to learn more? So making sure they have a clear profile, making sure that you're also connected to the right HR and recruiters makes you a little bit more visible. And sometimes when the opportunity arises, then it's better for you. It's also better for you because you get to pick and choose if this is what you want to do, rather than the mode of like, okay, constantly sending so many applications and hoping for the best. So it's a bit more of an approach of like attracting the opportunities over time. Okay, I think we have a quick question. Probably I'll answer it a little bit later because I think we have 2 more minutes before I finish the slides. Okay, so yep, so at the end of it is make sure that you level up your future ready skills to elevate your career. So here are actually I won't go through every one of them, but here are top 12 skills for corporate success that I've pretty much picked them out because this is a question I get asked a lot. How did I manage to move up the corporate ladder so quickly? So in my late 20s, I was already running multi-million-dollar projects, regulatory projects for Standard Chartered Bank, dealing with the US and UK regulator. So these are pretty much the 12 that I've identified. If you want to learn a bit more, you can go to my website where I have a little bit more details, or I have 10-minute podcasts that talks about each and every one of them and give you more perspective and how you can improve on them. So I won't go through all of them, but just letting you guys know that there are some skills that you can pick up. Is to do well in a corporate job, it is way beyond your just having a good CV or having good interview skills. So once you get into the company, you need to make sure that you do well as also. Okay, right, so these are just the next 6, won't go into detail. All right, so I always like to end my talks with top 3 learnings. So if you have a quick 10-20 seconds right now, I just want you to do a couple of quick bullets on your piece of paper if you have one. What actions will you take from today? What have you learned? And what are some of the things that you will go and implement after today's section? So if you want to share a bit, you can also put it in the chat box. In the meantime, you have questions you want to ask me, you can also put into the chat box right now. Okay. Lastly, if you have not yet connected on LinkedIn, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I share career tips every day, ranging from mindset, job skills, networking, all sorts. So here's the QR code. You can scan and let's get connected. Oops. Hold on. So I also run events from time to time. So tonight I have a Speak Up and Be Heard training, and next week I have a Establishing LinkedIn Professional Branding training. So all of which I normally announce on my LinkedIn. So if you're not yet connected, let's connect. And if you want to learn a little bit more about some of the soft skills I talked about, whether it be soft skills or personality, you can, feel free to check out my YouTube. So that's where I normally upload all my podcasts. So I'm just going to leave it here for a 1 minute more, and maybe we can take some questions. I think Chinzi, you want to?
Okay, so let me start with the first question from Alicia. So sorry, back to the achievement bit. So you can, if I am mentioning participation in special lecture or webinar, what kind of achievement should I include?
Okay, so I think you need to be realistic, right, as to what would determine an achievement. So if you're attending in a lecture or a webinar, but you're not the organizer, meaning you're just there to listen, then that is part of your professional development. It could be part of your learning. So you can just write something like, maybe you can have a different header and just say that continuously participate to improve my soft skills. And then you can maybe put in a couple of bullets to just list down the kind of talks that you attend. So just to give the HR or recruiter or even hiring manager a better sense of like how serious do you take professional development, and also shows a lot of attitude as well. But make sure that you are not bundling everything as an achievement, because then it does not come across very well, right? So just be honest about it, right? Just put in like a continuous learning, something like that, professional development, continuous professional development, and then you can put in the bullets if you are doing a bit of a learning. But if you happen to be the organizer, whereby you're kind of, you know, in charge of like running projects and really organizing the entire webinar, getting all the speakers and so forth, that could be something that you put into like your leadership and co-curricular activity, right? So because that's probably something that could allow you to demonstrate more leadership skills, right? So carving that out very clearly is important.
Okay. So the next question is from Daniel. So could you elaborate emotional intelligence?
Okay, so emotional intelligence essentially is about self-awareness. So it's about how much you understand yourself, and more importantly, how much can you identify the emotions in yourself and other people. So do you know when you are excited? And more importantly, especially at the workplace, do you know what annoys you? Do you know what makes you panic? Do you know what makes you angry, frustrated, stressed out? Because if you cannot identify that in yourself, it will reach a certain point where you will annoy someone else. You will annoy a colleague, but you don't even know it. You will annoy your boss, but you don't even know it, right? So that's something that can be developed just by spending a little bit of time understanding yourself, and obviously being a little bit more tactful by asking questions, or rather listening to what is being asked, and so that you can also identify if basically that is the right time to potentially have a conversation, or that also allows you to determine what you should say and what you shouldn't say, because people dynamics and people relationship at the workplace sometimes is a little bit complicated. So yeah, okay.
So the next question is from Ong. So what should I do if the interviewer asks me a stupid question?
Okay, so this is actually a mindset problem, because there are actually no stupid questions. If you think that it's a stupid question, it means that you have already blocked out all the possibilities. So meaning could mean that you have rehearsed all your answers, but the questions didn't come out what you expected it to. So maybe you might panic a little bit. So basically there are no stupid questions, but sometimes the questions are intended to see if you can handle surprises. So I can share with you two questions that I got asked in my interview many years ago, which I thought was like, what kind of nonsense is this? So the first question I got, because you know, like in CV, sometimes you write your hobbies, right? So a lot of people like to write reading as a hobby, you know, badminton reading, all that nonsense, right? Everybody writes reading. So I was like, okay, I wrote reading. So there's this one, one of the hiring managers, eventually I worked for him and he's still my mentor up to today. So he asked me, oh, Mei-Ping, so you wrote reading in your CV. So what do you like to read? So I was like, oh, because I was like, I mean, everybody writes reading, right? You don't even think about it. So I said, oh, you know, I like, okay, at that time, Yahoo was a big thing. I know like you guys are really young, but at that time, Yahoo articles was a big thing. So I said, oh, you know, I just really like to read like those, you know, 5 steps for productivity, 6 steps for this and that, like simple articles that I like to read. Then he was like, oh, okay. Then he said, oh, but do you read books, like books? So I said, yeah, but like not very often. So I thought like, oh my God, like, am I going to get away with this? So he said, oh, so you do read books. Tell me about the latest book that you've read. So but luckily, I literally the previous week, I just read an American classic, which is To Kill a Mockingbird. So I said, oh, actually, the latest book I've read, like not that recent, but like 2 weeks ago, was To Kill a Mockingbird. And he said, oh yeah, ethical speech, right? And then I just said a few things. So I was like, oh, like, you can take it as a stupid question, but you can also see it's like, okay, that's why I say don't write anything that you cannot explain in your CV. And number 2, everything that you write, you make sure you have 2 examples. So that was the first question that kind of, I would say, like, people normally don't ask about your hobbies, right? So nowadays I write, I mean, later in my career, I tend to write travel because I have a lot of travel stories. So the other question I actually got asked by the VP, the regional head of Asia Pacific before I joined Visa. So that was my first interview with Visa. So he asked me, so I mean, you guys are like finance professionals, right, in this GMT group. So he asked me, oh, you know that the taxation, the dual taxation issue is a really, really big issue in the world, right? All the politicians are arguing about it. Every country is arguing about it. What do you think is causing it? And what do you think we can do to fix it? So everything that I said, he just So I was like, oh my God, this is crazy, right? But later on, what I learned was that if you don't know, you just say you don't know. And you just said that, okay. So I at a later point, I told him that, okay, this is kind of what I think it is. But as in like, if you want to go in a little bit deeper, to be honest, I don't know. But after this interview, I'll be sure to read up on it. And he was like, okay, I accept this answer. And 2 days later, I actually got the call for another interview. So I was like, okay, actually I did well, but I didn't try to like BS my way to say something that I know is not true. It's just better to tell what you know. But if you don't know, just say, I'm really sorry, I don't know, but to the extent that I'm aware of is this. But after the interview, I can always go up and read about it more. Like, be honest. There are no stupid questions. No stupid questions. Okay, hopefully I've answered your question. I know it's a very long-winded answer.
Yeah, it's a very pretty good example. So the next question is from Zin. I don't know if I pronounce it correctly, but his question is, while applying for jobs in the UK, I was told that recruiter uses a CV keyword search tool to search for keywords in CV. So what kind of keywords are they looking for?
Okay, so there are two types of keywords. At the end of the day, it is back to what kind of role are you applying for. If you're randomly applying, then you will definitely get caught in this. So before you apply, you should know the kind of role that you're applying for and what kind of, what is normally in the JD of similar roles, right? That is actually the keyword that they're looking for. So you can say that I'm applying for an accountant role, but nothing you write in your CV is related to an accountant. So how is the recruiter going to identify if you are relevant? So the keyword search is not being done for fun. It's to identify the best fit. So, without talking to each and every one, they may not know, but it just give them a better idea of like, whether you could potentially be a good fit. So two kinds. The first keyword is very job related. So, accountant, maybe, analysis, right? I should see something about financial budget, something like that. But the other part would be like soft skills, communication, team player, dedication, those kind of keywords normally HR really likes to look for. So two angles as well. Everything is like two angles: technical, soft skill, because hiring manager looking for technical skills, HR looking for soft skills. Okay.
Yeah. As we are going slightly over time, so I will cut a few questions here. So I'll maybe end this with the last question from Ong. So is there any recommended limit on the number of pages for my CV?
I think if you're a fresh graduate, maximum 2. Anything more than 2, I think you're pushing it, because there's impossible that you have done that much that you can write more than 2 pages. So I think you just need to be realistic, because sometimes like more pages doesn't mean it's a good thing. More pages could actually create more confusion. Like even when I worked for 10 years, my CV is only 2 pages. So if you have only worked with an internships for 6 months, how can it be yours is like 5 pages? So yeah, be concise is much more important than being lengthy, but people can't quite get what your value is. Okay.
True. So Ms. Mei-Ping, thank you very much for spending your precious time to share your experience with us. So I believe all of us here have benefited a lot from your experience sharing today. So now moving on to the second session. So our second speaker is the Senior Manager of Great Eastern. So let us welcome Ms. Eileen Lim from Great Eastern. Hi. Hello, Ms. Eileen.
Hi, everyone. Good morning.
Yeah,
Thank you very much for the invite. Okay, so basically, I've been with the company in the HR team for 13 years. So over the years, I've actually met a lot of candidates for various roles, applying for various roles, be it fresh graduates or even professionals with experience. And therefore, hopefully over the next 30 minutes or so, I will be able to help everyone understand a bit better what we look for and the type of questions that we will usually ask during the interview.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll just quickly share my screen. Okay, so basically I'll move on. I realized that mapping did cover some of the things that I may be sharing later. So if it is similar in nature, then I will try to quickly go through, right? So talking about cover letter, I would personally say that cover letter is something that is optional. If you are actually applying through the system, for example, then it may not necessarily be very important, because if you apply for a specific role, then what we will know, then we will easily know which role you're applying for. But if you are sending into, for example, a general email address, then it may be more important for you to prepare a cover letter so that we will be able to understand a bit better your area of interest. And when doing the cover letter, do ensure that you have the job description of roles that you're interested with you, so that you are able to prepare a cover letter that is relevant to the role. And of course, do ensure that we are able, when we read the cover letter, we are able to know you a bit better, your area of interest, and also to show off your writing ability. And then moving on the resume, mapping also covered the things that you should focus on and the things to avoid. Basically, from the hiring perspective, when you prepare your resume, do ensure that the formatting is consistent throughout. Mapping also mentioned about the font size, the font type. So it's important for you to know that it is not really that necessary to fit everything in one page, because there are people who try to fit everything in one page, therefore causing the font size to be too small for the reader to even read it. And the other thing is, I would also like to highlight that it is important that your resume is able to capture the reader's attention immediately, because like Mei-Ping shared earlier, we do not spend that many seconds to glance through a resume. So make sure that the resume is actually visually pleasing. It is not difficult for us to look for the keywords that we're looking for. And when I say keywords, a good way to find out the right keywords that will attract the attention will be from the job description itself. If it appears in the job description, then basically it means that these are the words that will help attract the attention of either the hiring manager or even the HR person reading through your resume. Moving on, we have these are some of the common content to include in a resume. Of course, like Mei-Ping mentioned, always remember to include your most recent contact information if you are abroad, and if you wish to provide a phone number, you please provide a phone number that we can reach out to you. And then do include keywords, your key skills and all that, so that it will be very easy for us to take a quick glance through. Applicant tracking system is basically a software that larger company uses. So sometimes the resume that we receive will not actually be reviewed by a human reader. The first glance is actually taken by the applicant tracking system, and the system basically filters the application through keywords. We are able to configure the words that we wish to look for. For example, we can we can filter applications based on skill set, the years of experience in a certain role, the kind of education background, any specific certification that we're looking for. So if you know that you are sending in your application through the applicant tracking system, do ensure that all these areas are easily filtered. So try not to use fancy fonts, try not to use too many columns, too many graphics, because it will then affect the parsing system, and it may, although you may be the best candidate, it could potentially affect your opportunity of going through the system, because the system will be able to do a scoring system of your application to match with what the hiring manager and the HR team is looking for. So moving on, do not underestimate the importance of actually preparing for your interview. When you prepare, then you will feel calmer during the session. So basically what you can do to prepare yourself would be, do look through the company website, read through news of the company, whether perhaps there is a recent CSR activity or a recent acquisition or a recent product in the market. Connect with people that you know on LinkedIn who could be from the same company. Do look through the LinkedIn profile of people who will be meeting you, and also look through the social media, because this will then help you form a better idea about the company's culture. And this will eventually be able to help you connect better with the interviewers if you know a bit more about the company as compared to the rest of the candidates. Prior to the interview, it is good to practice. You may want to actually record yourself in an interview and play it back again, so that it can potentially help you identify areas for improvement. And for the interview day itself, do think through what you will be wearing. If you are unsure about the dress code, it is okay for you to check with the coordinator or the recruiter who called you for the interview whether there is a dress code. If you happen to know that the dress code is actually casual, it does not hurt to dress up a notch because you want to look polished on that day. So it's important not to experiment with something new on that day, something that you have not worn before. Wear something that fit you and flatter you, and something that you feel confident in. Don't go overboard with blings or put on too much perfume, because at the end of the day, you want to make a good first impression to your interviewers. Prior to your interview, if you are attending the interview at the office, do ensure you check out the route to the office and how long it takes. And if there are documents that are needed for the interview, do check with the recruiter on what are the documents that you need to prepare. And also, if it happens to be a video interview or even a phone call, then do ensure you know how to get connected and you do not stumble on the actual interview day. Okay. During the interview itself, it's important for you to know that the interviewers will want to feel at ease with you too, because essentially people are attracted to people who will make them feel at ease. So do ensure you pay attention to that, and always maintain good eye contact. There could be a few interviewers at the very same time, so it is important for you to maintain eye contact with each and every one, even those who are more quiet and those who may not be asking you questions, but they could play the role of an observer. Do make sure that you have constant eye contact with everybody, and be present. Be present meaning do not let your mind wander off. It is fairly common to be very nervous, and sometimes you could be thinking of, oh, what are they possibly thinking about me, and you're worried about this and that. But do remember to always bring yourself back to the room, pay attention to the questions, because this will then help you prepare better answers, and you'll be able to take on the questions better. On the interview day itself, do remember to be polite to everybody, because sometimes candidates, they may put on a different persona when they meet their interviewers, but they may not know that the interviewers will also be able to get some notes from even the receptionist or even the security guard to ensure that the interviewer is putting on a consistent behavior or impression throughout the different areas in the office. So it's important during the interview itself to ensure that the conversation is enjoyable, be memorable, but in a good way. Then interviewers, basically, the most important thing is do ensure that you are able to share relevant experience during the interview. Interviewers look for things like the candidate's enthusiasm towards the company, towards the job, your energy level, your ability to engage them, and most importantly, whether you will be a good fit for the organization. Now, I have actually pulled out about 8 questions that are pretty common, and I will try to run through quickly because some of the questions Phing has also covered earlier. So I will try to run through the questions. The first one is, tell me about yourself. This is actually quite a classic question. I would say that this is a good question to start off for most interviewers. You can almost always say that the question will be asked at the start of interview, and it is basically a question that is unstructured. So it is basically for you to highlight what the strengths are. Do take a look at the job description. You may want to tell an interesting story, but an honest story, so that you are able to highlight your strength to help us understand a bit better why you are a good candidate for the role. Then moving on, what is your greatest strength is also one of the most common interview questions. For this question, it's important for you to know that it may sound very easy, but at the end of the day, you do not want to sound too arrogant. Be humble, and when you provide strengths, do prepare the examples or the evidence to basically support it. What is your greatest weakness? Usually is also a very common question. It is important to show that you and you are aware of your own weakness and you are able to admit your weakness. It shows that you are a realistic person, and this in fact can give more confidence to the hiring manager to make a decision about hiring you. But when highlighting your weakness, do include your plan to overcome the weakness. And try to focus on a weakness that will not affect your opportunity of getting the job. Why should we hire you is also a common question. So show them again, share with them again why you are such a great fit and what differentiates you from the rest. And then for the question on why do you want to work here, it is essentially for the company to evaluate your true interest and commitment to the company and the role. So try to start with what you can contribute with the company first before you weave in your own personal goals. And then okay, the question on what you like to do outside work, maybe I can get everyone to put in a chat box, what do you think is a good way to answer the question? What are the things that you could probably answer for the question? So I have talked about your hobbies, your interests, volunteering, and taking online classes. Yeah, these are basically these these are basically very good answers to the questions. It will actually help the interviewer get a better idea about who you are and whether you have what it takes to fit into the company. So do share something that is true and something that will help you help the interviewer understand how you are a good fit to the organization. And then for fresh graduates, because it is quite common for the hiring manager to sometimes wonder if fresh graduates really know what they're looking for. So the question of where they see themselves in 5 years does help interviewers understand or picture better whether you are committed to the role, whether you are really clear that this is the role that you are looking for. So do let the hiring manager and the interviewer know how you plan to add value. And also, if it helps, you can break down the answer into chunks of probably for the next 2 years what I will do, and subsequent 3 years what you will do. But for this question, my personal suggestion is that you may want to avoid mentioning a specific job title, meaning sharing that after 5 years I see myself as heading the team, for example. You may want to share a bit more about how you plan to contribute, what are the values that you're able to bring to actually help the interviewers see your commitment to the role, because they need to ensure that you are actually applying for a role where you see yourself stay for the next few years. And then lastly, it's the question of, do you have any questions to me? It is actually fairly common for us to get a no, but honestly, I would suggest that it is best for you to prepare some questions for me, because this actually helps the interviewer understand, helps the interviewer see that you have actually been paying attention, because you can actually ask questions to go in depth about something that has been covered earlier. Or you can ask questions to show that you are genuinely excited, and it will also help you put on a strong note at the end, because it shows that you are very excited about the company, the role, and personally for yourself, it will also help you make a better decision if the role and the company is the right company for you. So do use the opportunity when you ask this question to ask some questions. And some of the questions that I suggest would be to ask the interviewer or the hiring manager qualities that are required to be successful, what are the challenges for the role, and what are the priorities for the person coming into the role. Because these are questions that will actually help you to see whether the role is the right role for you. You may also want to ask about the company culture in detail, about the team and all that, so that you can make a better decision if the company is the right company for you. And then at the end of the interview, my suggestion is to always write a short note to the interviewers. You may want to use this to actually express interest in moving on to the next step. And it is also good for you in the event if you realize that you wanted to mention something but you forgot and you wanted to add on points to help you get the role, then you may want to write that in the thank you note. Or if you have actually made a mistake, for example, then you may also want to use the thank you note, put it something for recovery purpose. As to when to follow up after job interview, most of the candidates, they will ask for next steps at the end of the interview. Meaning at the end of the interview, do check with the interviewers how long it will take for them to review your suitability. And it is fine to follow up after the timeline. And in the event, if you find out that you did not get the role, do ensure that you show grace, because you never know when the opportunity will open up again in the same role or even in other roles within the organization. All right, so basically that's it from me. To summarize my points, do be authentic. Most importantly, be authentic and truthful. Be comfortable with yourself. Always be engaged and also show enthusiasm during the interview. Chinzi, yeah.
Oh, thank you very much, Miss Eileen. So now we will proceed to the Q&A session. So maybe I could start with some questions that I didn't cover previously with mapping, because I believe you could answer those questions because it is similar.
Sure.
So this question is from Marcilia. When talking about my experience on my CV, should I explicitly mention the skills that I have gained or developed?
Yes, you should.
Okay.
Because to me, it shows self-awareness, and the experience stated actually will help support the case that you have actually indeed gained that particular skill set.
Okay. So I hope that answers Marcelia's question. So the next one is from Charlene. So how far back can my resume go? For example, could I include the volunteer work which I have done 3 years ago?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. So maybe is there a limit to it? Maybe if 5 years back it's too long, or 4 years, 3 years. So what do you think about that?
I think if it's significant enough, then there is no limit in the number of years. But you may want to filter by how significant the experience is to the role that you're applying for.
Okay, okay. Yep, that's a good answer. So I believe that answers your question, Charlene. So the next question is from Alif. So does asking for an immediate feedback during interview Q&A is a good strategy?
We do occasionally get that. I think it is a good strategy because it will also help you understand yourself better. And in the event if you may not get the role, then you you would have actually gotten some feedback from the hiring manager about your areas for improvement. It will also help you reflect back for you to improve in the next round.
Okay, okay. I see. So uh, the next question is from Daniel. So how would you recommend on preparing for an online interview?
Right. For online interview, right? For online interview, well, you need to check out the tool, the platform that they will be using if you're not familiar. Then, of course, the usual, ensure that you do not get interrupted because you could be at home. And also, you may want to check whether there, other than the online interview, whether there is a need for you to eventually still meet the hiring manager in the office, because certain companies during this period, they may still require candidates to go for a face-to-face interview.
I see, I see. So I hope that answers your question, Daniel. So the next question is from Angeline. So what is the difference between a resume and a CV? And
Essentially, it is just two different words, but it is meant for the same purpose.
okay, okay.
Mm.
So the second part of the question is for a part-time job asking for a CV, such as retail, do we alter the CV to suit the field if you are from, say, a legal background?
I need to clarify a bit. Are you saying, engineer, are you saying that you should alter the CV because your background is legal, but then you're applying for a retail role, is it?
Angeline, you could type in the chat box or just unmute yourself and respond. Okay, while we are waiting for her, so maybe I proceed to the next question. So the next question is from Kai. So what does the ATS do? Is there any tips to get through the system?
To get through the system, right, basically try to avoid too many graphics, fancy font types, too many columns, because what the ATS does is that it will identify keywords. It will actually pull up things like your experience, certain education that we're looking for, certain skill sets that we're looking for, and try to use common naming convention. For example, if you are putting in your professional experience, for example. Professional experience would be a common way for us to mention about our past job experience. But if you put in something as an alternative, for example, so that it sounds fancier, like things that I have done, then the system may not be able to pull up the experience because it doesn't read things that I have done before, for example. So try to stick to the classic way of putting in the titles and all that, so that it will help the system pull up the relevant keywords, skill sets, years for the purpose.
Okay, okay. I hope that answers your question, Kai. So back to Angeline. So she replied, yes, my CV is mostly legal based in Malaysia for part-time jobs. They mostly do not ask for it, but in the UK, my experience has been different.
I would say that if it is a part-time role, then you may not necessarily need to amend your CV for that purpose, because it is meant for a part-time role, and people may not be overly worried looking at someone with legal background applying for example, a barista job. But say, for example, if you're looking for a permanent role in retail later on and your experience is in legal, then you may need to put in some summary as to why you are thinking of changing your career path, for example. Otherwise, if you have legal background and you're applying to a retail kind of industry, then they may be a bit worried about whether that is just going to be a short stepping stone for you.
Okay, Angeline, does that answer your question? So if you have further questions, you could type in the chat later, and I'll direct it to Miss Eileen. So the next question is from Tai Yu Xiang, which his question is, how can you identify someone's work ethic by just looking at their CV?
Honestly, this will be pretty difficult. There are companies who may have personality questionnaire to evaluate things like work preference, work ethic, but just looking at a person's CVs, to be honest, it will be very difficult for us to look at a person's work ethic. It will be something that we have got to try to assess when we actually meet the person for an interview, whether a face-to-face or a video interview.
Yep, true. So next question is from Alicia. So I asked this earlier in the previous session regarding the keywords. Any advice on what are the keywords recruiter are targeting, let's say in finance and industry?
If for the keywords, my suggestion is for you to look at the job description. Usually the description of the role will be available if you apply for a specific role. If it is not available, then if you're applying directly through a recruiter, then do get the recruiter to send it across to you. So keywords that they will be looking for would likely be words that appears a lot in the job description itself. So if, for example, if it's finance industry, then we'll probably be looking at, if say I am from an insurance industry, and for example, if you are looking for a role in, say, the claims department, then we may mention words like claims assessment, evaluation, risk. These are the common words that we will be looking for. But a good way to actually look at the right keywords will be in the job description itself.
Okay, that's a very good tip. So the next question is from Ka Liang. So can you elaborate on what we should include in our cover letter? Should we be elaborating on what we have in our CV?
I think the cover letter should be pretty short. It must not be too long. So do write something that showcase your personality. It doesn't have to be an elaboration of your CV. It will probably be able to help us understand you a bit better as a person. The kind of person you are, your personality, your interests and all that. And how you are suitable for the role that you're applying for.
Okay. So is there any more questions? So I will wait for 1 more minute. So if there's no additional questions, I will assume that there's no more questions from you guys. Okay, Alicia asked 1 more question, which is just wondering how technical should a CV be?
You are referring to technical in the sense of based on your own education background, is it, Alicia? As to how technical it should be, say for example, if you are doing law, then then should you mention all the technical terms, is it?
Alicia, oh, I'm from legal
Yeah.
field, yes. Yeah.
Yes, okay. Yes, yeah. You can actually pick on certain technical terms, but you do not need to go overboard with the technical terms, because we will also want to have a holistic view of yourself. So if it's all technical, then it may not appear very attractive also at a glance.
Yep. Alicia, does that answer
Do
your question?
highlight the relevant technical terms that will be relevant to the job. Yeah.
Yep, that's helpful. Yeah, thank you, Phing. So, another question from Alif. So, how would you answer a question about describing yourself?
How would you describe yourself, is it? If you wish to have a more structured way of, it is actually pretty much an unstructured question, but a good way would be to describe yourself to help the interviewer see how you will fit into the role. So a good understanding of the role is important in this case.
Okay.
So if, for example, if you're applying for a job, let's say as an internal auditor, then you may describe yourself as someone who is very organized, someone who is very meticulous, someone who writes very well, assuming all these are the truth about your own ability. Yeah. So do try to relate it back to the role that you're applying for.
Okay, so that's a good tip. So, any other further questions? Okay, I take that as a no. So, yeah, great answer. Thank you. So, I think this marks an end for today's session. Thank you very much, Ms. Eileen, for spending your precious time to share your experience with us. So could we still, may I ask all of you to turn on your camera again so that we could have a group photo with Ms. Eileen?
Hello. I think Angeline has a question. We should not forget her. I think Angeline has the last question.
Oh, okay. So
Oops.
Angeline's question is, if we do not know the hiring team's address, or who will it be received by? That's is that a complete question? If we do not know the hiring team's address, or who will it be received by? I assume how do you address it? Is that the question you were going to ask?
Okay, I'll chip in. He's asking, how should she address cover letter? So you're writing a cover letter at the start. Who do you address to if you don't know who you're writing to? And what is the address you should put up there? Is it, say you have a company with which is a big company, and there are like multiple offices. So which one would you actually write? I guess that's what she's asking.
Yeah.
I see. If you know, if usually it goes to the HR team first, and usually the HR team is centralized at the head office. So if there are branches and all that you're applying for, perhaps you can still stick with the head office. Honestly, we are not overly particular about how it is addressed to. It's more to the content of your cover letter itself. So we will not actually demerit someone who actually puts the wrong address, for example. Yeah. Because it's not really something that we will expect the applicant to have to. knowledge of where to address it. Yeah. Most importantly is actually the content of your cover letter. So don't be too worried about that. Yeah.
Agree with that. So before we end, please fill up the feedback form via the link posted on the comment section to help us improve in our future events. So thank you once again, Ms. Eileen. I believe all of us here have benefited a lot.
Thank you, everyone.
So
Thank you, Eileen.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, also thank you everyone for
Thank you
listening.
for the invite.
Yeah.
Yes. Have a good day ahead.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much once again. So thank you everyone for listening and engaging actively throughout the workshop as well. We hope that all of you joining us today have learned something valuable. So we look forward to seeing you in the upcoming mock interview sessions and engineering workshops by Atkins and Disney, starting from the 17th of October. So thank you all once again and see you soon.